My younger brother somehow managed to blow almost his entire inheritance on a brand new luxury SUV. Then less than a week later he asked me to start paying the monthly expenses because he deserved to enjoy it. When I told him no, I had no idea that my parents would end up taking his side. Last Sunday I drove over to my parents' house for our usual family dinner. Before I even turned off my engine, I noticed a dark blue Jeep Grand Cherokee parked right in the middle of the driveway like it belonged in a dealership showroom. It still had the temporary plates on it, and every inch of it gleamed in the afternoon sun. Standing beside it was my brother, Ethan. He wasn't even pretending to be casual. He leaned against the driver's door with his arms folded and that smug grin he always gets when he's waiting for someone to compliment him. I parked my 12-year-old Toyota Corolla next to his new SUV. It wasn't exciting, but it had been paid off for years, never left me stranded, and didn't cost me a fortune every month. The difference between our cars pretty much summed up the difference between our lives. There he is. Ethan shouted as I got out. Come check this thing out. I walked over. It's definitely new, I said. He laughed. Come on, man. Isn't it beautiful? I looked it over for a moment. Leather interior. Panoramic sunroof. Premium wheels. Every option imaginable. What did it cost? He answered without the slightest hesitation. 46 grand. He said it so casually that you'd think he'd spent $46 instead. That's a lot of money? He shrugged. I wanted something I'd actually enjoy driving. I'm tired of watching everyone else have nice things. That sentence immediately rubbed me the wrong way. I'm tired of watching everyone else have nice things. As if the rest of us had somehow prevented him from buying whatever he wanted. So where'd the money come from? I asked. He smiled even wider. Grandpa's inheritance. I had figured as much. Our grandfather passed away about 2 years earlier. He left each grandchild just over $80,000. It wasn't life-changing wealth, but it was enough to build a solid foundation if you were careful. I had used most of mine as the down payment on my house. The rest stayed invested as an emergency fund. Ethan apparently had a different definition of planning for the future. You used all of it? Almost. He started counting things off on his fingers. The SUV needed a big down payment. I upgraded my computer, bought a new gaming setup, replaced my phone, and took a couple vacations. He smiled proudly. You only live once. I couldn't argue with that. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that he'd managed to burn through more than $80,000 in under 24 months. One purchase after another. No savings. No investments. Nothing left. I glanced back toward the SUV. Insurance can't be cheap. His expression changed just enough for me to notice. It isn't terrible. That tiny hesitation told me everything. Still, I wasn't interested in starting an argument before dinner. I simply nodded and we headed inside. The house smelled exactly the way it always had on Sundays. Roast chicken, fresh bread, and one of Mom's vanilla candles burning in the kitchen. She came over and hugged me. Did you see Ethan's new vehicle? She asked excitedly. It's hard to miss. Isn't it gorgeous? He finally treated himself. Treated himself wasn't exactly how I'd describe draining an inheritance account, but I kept that thought to myself. Dinner stayed pleasant for the most part. Dad talked about football. Mom asked how work was going. I told them about a promotion I'd recently accepted. Meanwhile, Ethan somehow managed to steer almost every conversation back to his SUV. The horsepower. The sound system. The adaptive cruise control. How everyone at work kept asking to sit inside it. How strangers complimented him at gas stations. He couldn't stop talking about it. Eventually dinner ended, and while everyone else cleared the table, Ethan caught my eye. Hey, he said quietly. Can we step outside for a minute? Something about his tone immediately made me suspicious. Out on the back patio, he pulled out his phone and stared at the screen instead of looking at me. So, he scratched the back of his neck. There's kind of a problem. I waited. The insurance payment is higher than I expected. How much? About $310 a month. I mentally multiplied it by 12. Almost $4,000 every year. And that was just insurance. Not gas. Not maintenance. Not the loan. Nothing else. That's pretty normal for an expensive SUV, I replied. Yeah. He shifted his weight. The thing is, money's a little tight until I move into management. There it was. I had a feeling I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. He finally looked up at me. I was wondering if you could cover the insurance for a few months. He smiled like he was asking to borrow $20 instead of expecting me to take over part of the cost of a vehicle I had never wanted in the first place. I looked at him for a second. What management position? The assistant manager opening, Ethan answered immediately. They're expanding to another location. My supervisor already hinted the job's mine. I almost laughed. Over the last few years, I'd heard versions of that exact speech more times than I could count. A promotion that was basically guaranteed. A better paying job that was right around the corner. A business idea that was finally going to take off. Somehow none of those things had ever happened. Ethan, I said carefully, I'm not paying your insurance. It's temporary. I don't care if it's for 2 weeks or 2 years. His smile disappeared. You really won't help your own brother? You bought a vehicle you couldn't afford. I can afford it. Then why are you asking me for money? That hit a nerve. His jaw tightened. I just need a little help until my income catches up. No, I answered. What you actually need is to adjust your lifestyle. His eyes narrowed. It must be nice. I frowned. What? It must be nice having enough money that you can judge everyone else. There it was. Whenever Ethan made a terrible financial decision, somehow I became the villain simply because I hadn't made the same mistake. I have savings because I planned ahead. Oh, here we go. He rolled his eyes dramatically. Mr. Responsible. I'm not trying to lecture you. No. He laughed without any humor. Every conversation with you turns into a lesson. I'm telling you the truth. No, he shot back. You're telling me you think you're smarter than me. I never said that. You didn't have to. I rubbed my forehead. I made different choices with Grandpa's money. That's all. And now you're acting like I'm some idiot. I think buying a luxury SUV when you're barely covering rent was a bad decision. The silence that followed lasted only a couple seconds. It felt much longer. Finally he shook his head. Forget it. He shoved his phone back into his pocket. I guess family only matters when it's convenient. Then he walked back inside without another word. I stayed on the patio for another minute, staring out across my parents' backyard. This wasn't really about the SUV. It never was. This had been our family dynamic for years. Ethan spent money he didn't have. Something went wrong. Everyone looked at me to fix it. Most of the time, I did. I tell myself it was easier than fighting. Easier than disappointing Mom. Easier than listening to everyone accuse me of abandoning family. Unfortunately, every time I bailed him out, it only guaranteed there would be a next time. This time felt different. I knew if I paid that insurance bill it wouldn't stop there. Next month it would be the loan payment. Then gas. Then repairs. I'd become financially responsible for a vehicle I never wanted him to buy. I wasn't willing to do that. I went back inside, thanked Mom for dinner, told Dad I'd see him later, and left without saying another word to Ethan. The drive home was quiet. At first, I thought maybe the conversation was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. About half an hour after I got home, I changed into sweatpants, made myself a cup of coffee and settled onto the couch. That's when my phone vibrated. It wasn't Ethan. It was Mom. I expected something like, "Can we talk?" Or maybe, "What happened between you boys?" Instead I opened the text and read one sentence. "If you won't help your brother, don't bother coming for Thanksgiving or Christmas." I read it again. Then a third time. No greeting. No explanation. No attempt to hear my side. Just an ultimatum. Either I paid for Ethan's expensive mistake, or I wasn't welcome at family holidays. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It wasn't even about helping someone keep the lights on or buy groceries. She wanted me to help finance a luxury SUV. I sat there staring at my screen while memories started piling up faster than I could stop them. The first loan after Ethan dropped out of community college. The rent payments when he'd quit another job without having a backup. The money for security deposits. The credit card bill he promised he'd repay next month. The insurance deductible after he backed into another driver's car. The cash he'd borrowed because one emergency after another somehow kept happening. I had stopped keeping track years ago. Curious, I opened the budgeting spreadsheet I use for everything. I searched his name. The total surprised even me. Just over $16,000. $16,000. Some loans had been partially repaid. Most hadn't. I remembered every excuse. Payroll messed up. I'll pay you after my tax refund. Just give me another month. I haven't forgotten. Eventually I'd stopped asking. Not because I didn't care. Because I knew I'd never see that money again. And now my mother expected me to keep funding him. I looked back at her message. For years I'd convinced myself I was helping my brother. But maybe I'd really been protecting everyone else from the consequences of his decisions. Especially my parents. Because as long as I stepped in they never had to tell him no. That's when something inside me became incredibly clear. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. I opened Mom's contact. Pressed block caller. Then Ethan's. Blocked. Dad almost never called or texted on his own, but I knew he'd support whatever Mom decided. I blocked his number too. Finally I opened the family group chat. I stared at years of holiday photos, birthday messages, and reminders about Sunday dinners. Then I quietly left the conversation. No speeches. No dramatic goodbye. No final argument. Just silence. I set my phone on the coffee table and waited for the guilt to hit me. I expected panic, regret, second thoughts. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. That night I cooked dinner, watched an old movie I'd been meaning to see, and went to bed earlier than usual. For the first time in months, I slept all the way through the night without waking up wondering how I was going to solve someone else's problem. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone rattling across the nightstand. For a split second, I thought my alarm had malfunctioned. It hadn't. My lock screen was packed with notifications. I unlocked it and stared. 49 missed calls. Almost all of them had come in overnight. Mom had called 17 times. Ethan had called 21. Dad, who normally hated talking on the phone, had tried 7 times. Even my Aunt Karen had called 4 times. The first call started less than an hour after I'd blocked everyone. When they couldn't reach me, they simply kept trying. Every 15 minutes. Then every 10. Then back to back. I opened my voicemail. 26 new messages. The first one was from Mom. Honey, I don't know what happened, but call me as soon as you hear this. The second was Ethan. Seriously? You're blocking me now? Grow up. The third was Mom again. This isn't how adults solve problems. Dad's message surprised me the most. He almost never left voicemails. Your mother's worried. Please call her. As I worked through the rest, I noticed a pattern. At first they sounded confused, then frustrated, then angry. Eventually they shifted into guilt. Families don't abandon each other. Your brother needs you. Is this really worth tearing the family apart? One voicemail even said something that made me stop the recording. Grandpa would be heartbroken if he saw this. That one irritated me more than anything. Grandpa had taught both of us to live within our means. He certainly wouldn't have wanted his inheritance turned into a luxury SUV that someone else had to finance. Near the end, the messages suddenly became softer. Almost apologetic. Can we just move past this? Let's fix everything. But none of them actually apologized. No one admitted they'd been wrong. No one acknowledged the ultimatum. The only thing they wanted was for me to give in. Then I noticed something else. Although I'd blocked Ethan's phone calls, a few text messages had still slipped through another messaging app. The newest one had arrived less than 20 minutes earlier. Attached was a screenshot. His insurance invoice. 3 months due up front. $912. Beneath it he had typed, "You're really going to let this happen to me?" I stared at that sentence. Not, "I made a mistake." Not, "I shouldn't have bought something this expensive." Not, "I'm looking for extra work." Instead, "You're going to let this happen." As though I had somehow purchased the SUV. As though I had signed the paperwork. As though his choices had become my responsibility the moment they became inconvenient. That realization hit me harder than I expected. For years I'd carried around this constant pressure in my head. Always wondering when the next emergency would arrive. Who would need money? Who would need rescuing? Who would expect me to step in? Now the pressure wasn't inside me anymore. It was sitting on their side of the conversation. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to answer. I got ready for work like any other Monday. Coffee, shower, breakfast. While I was getting dressed, my phone continued buzzing with notifications from relatives whose numbers I hadn't blocked. Aunt Karen texted first. "Your mom is devastated. Please call her." A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly messaged me. "Heard something happened. Everything okay?" A few minutes later my Uncle Rick sent, "Whatever's going on, family should stick together." It was happening exactly the way it always had. The family information network had activated. Everyone received one version of the story. Everyone reached the same conclusion. And somehow, I was the problem. No one asked why I'd blocked everyone. No one wondered whether something serious had happened. Nobody asked if I was alright. They'd already decided the answer. Ethan needed help. Therefore I needed to provide it. That had always been the formula. Unfortunately for them, this time the formula wasn't working. I switched my phone to silent, put it inside my desk drawer and focused on work. Every now and then curiosity got the better of me. Around lunchtime I checked the screen. 37 new notifications. The messages had become noticeably more emotional. Mom. Please, sweetheart. I don't understand why you're punishing us. Ethan. I can't believe you're willing to ruin my life over one payment. Dad. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Aunt Karen. I'm staying neutral, but I really think you should call home. I read every message carefully. What stood out wasn't what they wrote. It was what they never wrote. Not a single person asked what Ethan had actually requested. Not one person asked whether the ultimatum Mom sent me was real. Not one person wondered why I'd finally reached my breaking point. The assumption was automatic. I was the responsible one. Responsible people were expected to compromise. Responsible people apologized first. Responsible people solved problems they didn't create. That role had followed me my entire life. Only now I was starting to wonder if I'd accepted it for far too long. I locked my phone again and finished the workday. Driving home, I realized something strange. Instead of feeling anxious, I actually felt lighter. That evening I heated up leftovers, sat down on my couch, and finally played the remaining voicemails from start to finish. Listening to them one after another was almost surreal. Mom's emotions changed with every message. Confusion became frustration. Frustration turned into guilt. Guilt slowly transformed into desperation. And by the final voicemail, she sounded like she was running out of ways to convince me to come back. The next morning, I didn't wake up to my alarm. I woke up because my phone was vibrating so hard against the nightstand that it sounded like it was trying to escape the room. I reached over, still half asleep, and unlocked the screen. The notification count made me blink. 58 missed calls. For a second I honestly wondered if there had been some kind of emergency. Then I opened the call log. Mom. Mom again. Ethan. Mom. Dad. Ethan. Then a few calls from relatives I rarely even spoke to. The first calls had started not long after I'd blocked everyone the night before. Apparently, once they realized they couldn't reach me, they simply kept trying over and over. I opened my voicemail. There were nearly 30 messages waiting. The first one was Mom. Michael, please call me. I don't understand what you're doing. The next was Ethan. Seriously? You're ghosting your own family now? Another from Mom. This is completely unacceptable. Dad had even left one, which almost never happened. Son, call your mother. She's really upset. As I continued listening, I noticed a pattern. The messages changed over time. First confusion, then anger, then guilt, finally desperation. Families don't abandon each other. Your brother needs you. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Grandpa would hate seeing you act like this. One voicemail even ended with Mom saying, "Fine, if that's what it takes, we're sorry. Now please call us back." That word, sorry. It didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a bargaining chip. As though saying it automatically erased everything that had happened and obligated me to do what they wanted. Then I noticed something else. Even though I'd blocked Ethan's phone number, a few messages had still slipped through another messaging app we'd both used for years. The newest one had been sent less than 15 minutes earlier. It included a screenshot. His insurance statement. 3 monthly payments bundled together. Just under $900 due before the end of the week. Under the image he'd written, "You really going to let me lose my SUV over this?" I stared at the message. The wording bothered me more than the amount. Let me lose it. Not, I shouldn't have bought it. Not, I'm trying to figure this out. Not even, can you help me one last time? Instead, somehow the responsibility had magically become mine. If his SUV got repossessed, it would be because I had let it happen. I set the phone down for a moment, then picked it back up. The missed calls, the guilt, the pressure, the demands, something finally clicked. For years I'd carried all of this around in my own head. The constant expectation that I needed to rescue everyone else. Now the anxiety wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to answer. I made coffee, took a shower, got dressed, packed my lunch. While I was getting ready, the phone kept lighting up across the kitchen counter. Different names now. My aunt. A cousin I hadn't seen since a wedding years earlier. One of Mom's close friends. Apparently the family information network had gone into full operation. My aunt texted first. "Sweetheart, your mom is beside herself. Please call her." A cousin sent. "Heard something happen with Ethan. Everything okay?" Another relative wrote. "You know how your mother worries." Interesting. Not one person asked why I'd blocked everyone. They already assumed I was the problem. Because in my family that's how these situations always worked. Ethan made a reckless decision. Mom defended him. Relatives got involved. Eventually enough people pressured me until I gave in. Peace was restored. At least until the next disaster. Unfortunately for them, that routine wasn't going to work anymore. Before heading into the office, I switched my phone to silent and dropped it into my desk drawer. I focused on work instead. Meetings, emails, project deadlines. Every once in a while curiosity got the better of me. Around lunchtime I finally checked my phone. 36 new notifications. The messages had become noticeably more emotional. Mom. Please, Michael. I don't understand why you're punishing us. Ethan. I can't believe you'd leave me hanging after everything we've been through. Dad. Your mother's been crying all morning. My aunt. I'm not trying to get involved, but family should stick together. I read every message carefully. Not because I planned to respond. Because I wanted to see whether anyone at all, had stopped to ask a simple question. What actually happened? No one had. Not a single person. Nobody wondered why someone who'd shown up for every holiday, every birthday, every family emergency had suddenly cut off contact overnight. No one asked whether I was okay. No one considered that maybe there was a reason I'd reached my breaking point. Their only concern was getting me back into my usual role. The responsible brother. The reliable son. The family problem solver. The one expected to apologize even when he hadn't done anything wrong. The one expected to write the check whenever Ethan made another terrible decision. That realization hit harder than any angry voicemail. I put the phone away again and finished the rest of my workday without responding to a single message. By the time I got home that evening, there were even more voicemails waiting. Out of curiosity, I started listening from the beginning. Mom's emotional progression was almost predictable. The first few were confused, then disappointed, then angry, then heartbroken. And by the end, she had started making promises that sounded less like reconciliation and more like attempts to pull me back into the same cycle I'd finally walked away from. The rest of the voicemails followed the same pattern. The first few sounded demanding. Then came the accusations. Then the guilt. Then desperation. It was almost like listening to someone move through the stages of grief. One message from Mom said, "Michael, answer your phone. Right now." A few messages later she sounded hurt. "I honestly don't understand why you're doing this to us." Then came anger. "I never thought I'd raise someone this selfish." A few hours later, her tone shifted again. "If you don't come for Thanksgiving, that's your decision." But even that didn't last. The final messages were quieter. Almost pleading. "Please, just help your brother this one time." That phrase made me shake my head. Just this one time. Except it wasn't one time. It hadn't been one time in years. Every financial emergency. Every bad decision. Every impulsive purchase. Every unpaid bill. There had always been another, one last favor. If I added everything together, there had probably been dozens. Ethan's voicemails were much shorter. Mostly frustration. Mostly disbelief. "Dude, seriously? You'd really let this happen? I thought I could count on you." One message irritated me more than the others. "You've got Mom crying." That sentence stuck with me. Not because I felt guilty. Because of what it left out. Mom wasn't crying because Ethan had spent almost his entire inheritance on an SUV. She wasn't crying because she demanded I pay for his mistake. She wasn't crying because she'd threatened to cut me out of family holidays. According to Ethan, she was crying because I refused to rescue him. That told me everything I needed to know. Dad's messages were different. They weren't angry. Just exhausted. "Son. Please call your mother. We need to settle this. This family is falling apart." Listening to him was almost harder than listening to anyone else. Because I honestly believed he knew exactly what was happening. I think he understood Ethan had created this mess. I think he understood Mom had made it worse. But he'd spent his entire marriage avoiding conflict. Keeping the peace mattered more than standing up for what was right. So instead of telling Ethan to take responsibility, he wanted me to make everything disappear. Like always, after I finished listening, I deleted every voicemail. One by one. No hesitation. Then I set my phone down and looked around my living room. It was completely quiet. No arguing. No guilt. No pressure. Just silence. And strangely, that silence felt comforting. For the first time, I'd actually accepted the possibility that choosing my own peace might cost me my relationship with my family. It wasn't a happy realization, but it was an honest one. Just as I started making dinner, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. The text read, "Hey Michael. It's Aunt Carol. I'm using my office phone because I figured you'd blocked everyone else. I kept reading. I'm not calling to pressure you. I actually understand why you're upset. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I stared at those words for several minutes. Out of everyone in my family, one person had acknowledged that I might actually have a reason for what I'd done. She hadn't demanded anything. She hadn't defended Ethan. She hadn't told me to apologize. She simply said, "I understand." I didn't answer. Not yet. But I saved her number. Something told me I might need it later. The rest of the evening stayed surprisingly peaceful. No more calls. No more texts. Part of me wondered if everyone had finally accepted my silence. Another part suspected they were simply planning another strategy. As it turned out, the second guess was right. The next week became a masterclass in persistence. Once my family realized I wasn't responding through normal channels, they started getting creative. Mom borrowed Dad's phone. Blocked. Ethan used his girlfriend's number. I answered once without recognizing it. Mike finally. I ended the call before he could finish. Then blocked that number too. A couple days later, an email landed in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Family emergency." For one terrifying second I thought someone had been hurt. Instead, it was another message asking me to call home. I deleted it without replying. Then came Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, which I barely checked. Apparently nowhere on the internet was safe. Ethan's girlfriend even sent me a message saying, "Please just talk to him. He's really stressed." I didn't respond. Before long, the extended family started appearing. People I hadn't heard from in months suddenly remembered I existed. One cousin invited me out for coffee. An uncle wanted to hear both sides. A distant aunt sent me 3 long paragraphs about forgiveness. Every conversation followed the exact same script. First concern, then sympathy, then the inevitable twist. Maybe you should just help him this once. It became so predictable that I could practically finish their sentences before reading them. I ignored every single one. Then on the third evening my phone rang again. This time I recognized the number immediately. Aunt Carol. The only relative who had offered understanding instead of criticism. I hesitated before answering. Finally I picked up. "Please don't hang up," she said before I could speak. "I'm not calling to pressure you." I stayed silent. She continued. "I already told your mother she crossed a line. That got my attention." "You did." "I did." There was a pause. "I told her threatening to cut you out of the holidays because you wouldn't pay Ethan's bills was unfair." For the first time in days, I felt like someone in my family had actually listened before choosing a side. "I also told her something else," Aunt Carol continued. "I told her she spent years expecting you to clean up Ethan's mistakes instead of letting him deal with the consequences." I let out a quiet laugh. I'm guessing she didn't appreciate that. Not even a little. Carol sighed. She kept saying Ethan just needed support, that families are supposed to stand behind each other. "And what did you say?" I asked her why that responsibility always seems to fall on you. She paused for a second before adding, "I reminded her that healthy families don't threaten people when they set boundaries." I leaned back in my chair. "How did that go over?" "We haven't spoken since." For a moment neither of us said anything. Finally I broke the silence. "So, how's Ethan handling everything?" Carol hesitated. "Honestly? Yeah. He's in full panic mode." That didn't surprise me. The insurance deadline is almost here. He tried listing the SUV online, but nobody's offering enough to cover what he still owes. I closed my eyes. So he's underwater. By several $1,000s. Exactly what I'd expected. He'd probably accepted the first financing offer placed in front of him without reading the long-term numbers. The monthly payment. The interest. The depreciation. He'd focused on driving away in something flashy. Now reality had arrived. "I feel bad that he's stressed," I admitted. "But I'm still not paying for it." "I know," Carol replied immediately. "And I'm not calling to convince you otherwise." She lowered her voice. "I just thought you deserved to know what's happening instead of hearing some twisted version later." "I appreciate that. There is one more thing." Her tone became more serious. "Your mom is organizing something for Sunday." "What kind of something?" "A family meeting." I almost laughed. "You mean an intervention?" "That's basically what it is." She explained that Mom had invited nearly everyone. Uncles, aunts, cousins, anyone she thought might convince me to change my mind. "The plan," Carol said, "is to have everyone talk to you together. So they'll outnumber me." "I think that's the idea." I rubbed my forehead. I had a feeling she'd try something like that. Carol hesitated. I wouldn't be shocked if they showed up at your house if you don't come. That possibility hadn't occurred to me. But the more I thought about it, the more believable it sounded. Mom had always believed persistence solved everything. If one person couldn't convince me, maybe 12 could. Thanks for warning me. I just didn't want you blindsided. Before hanging up, she said something I wasn't expecting. I'm proud of you. I didn't answer immediately. She continued. I know how hard this must be. You've spent years being everyone's safety net. And walking away from that takes courage. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Those few words meant more than I wanted to admit. Thank you. After the call ended, I sat in silence for several minutes. I still felt alone. But not completely alone anymore. Having even one person acknowledge what I'd been dealing with made an enormous difference. Sunday arrived. The day of the so-called intervention. Needless to say, I never went. Instead, I bought myself a movie ticket, turned my phone off, and spent 2 hours watching an action film while eating overpriced popcorn. It was surprisingly relaxing. Nobody asking for money. Nobody accusing me of ruining the family. Nobody demanding explanations. Just 2 uninterrupted hours. When I finally switched my phone back on afterward, the notifications flooded in. Messages, voicemails, texts. Apparently the intervention had happened without its intended guest. One of my cousins texted first. Well, that was uncomfortable. Another message followed a minute later. Your mom cried almost the entire time. Someone else added. Ethan spent 20 minutes talking about how everyone abandoned him. My father, according to another relative, barely spoke at all. That part sounded painfully familiar. One uncle texted me privately. Your parents are genuinely worried. Another cousin wrote. Can I ask what actually happened? Everyone's acting like you did something terrible. I stared at that message. What exactly had I done? I'd said no. I'd refused to finance someone else's luxury purchase. I'd stopped acting like the family's emergency checking account. Apparently, that was considered the unforgivable offense. Meanwhile, almost nobody seemed interested in discussing the fact that Ethan had managed to burn through more than $80,000 and still expected someone else to cover his lifestyle. A week passed. Exactly 7 days after I'd blocked everyone, another unknown number sent me a single photo. I opened it. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I simply looked. It was Ethan's SUV, loaded onto the back of a tow truck. Underneath the picture was one sentence. Hope you're proud of yourself. I zoomed in. There wasn't much doubt. It really was his vehicle. Apparently he'd fallen behind far enough that the lender had finally repossessed it. I sat there for a long moment waiting to feel something. Guilt, relief, vindication. Instead, I mostly felt acceptance. He'd purchased something he couldn't realistically afford. He'd ignored the ongoing costs. He'd assumed someone else would rescue him if things went wrong. This was the outcome of those decisions. Not mine. I never replied to the photo. Over the next hour, however, more messages arrived. Some from numbers I'd never seen before. Others from relatives who kept finding new ways to contact me. Now Ethan has no transportation. He could lose his job because of this. Was proving your point really worth it? Family doesn't abandon each other. I noticed something strange. Every single message blamed me. Not one blamed Ethan for signing a loan he couldn't manage. Not one questioned why he'd expected someone else to cover the bills. In their version of events, the moment I stopped fixing the consequences, I became responsible for creating them. And somehow, that was easier for everyone to believe than admitting Ethan had caused this himself. By the beginning of the second week, things finally started to quiet down. Not completely. Every now and then another unfamiliar number would appear on my screen with a lecture or another attempt to shame me. I blocked each one without replying. Eventually the calls became less frequent. Either everyone was running out of numbers, or they had realized I wasn't going to cave. For the first time in years, my daily routine belonged entirely to me. I'd go to work, come home, cook dinner, read for a while, watch a movie, go to bed. There wasn't some new family emergency waiting every evening. No frantic phone calls. No request to transfer money. No expectation that I would somehow solve problems I hadn't created. At first, the silence felt strange. Then it became comforting. Eventually, it became something I realized I desperately needed. About 12 days after everything started, Aunt Carol called again. Got another update, she said. I could hear from her voice that it wasn't good news. Ethan moved back in with your parents. I wasn't exactly shocked. What happened? He couldn't keep paying rent after losing the SUV. So he gave up the apartment? Pretty much. She paused. He also quit the coffee shop. I frowned. He quit. He says he's looking for something closer to home now that he doesn't have transportation. I leaned back in my chair. So your parents are covering everything? Carol sighed. They are. Then she lowered her voice. I don't think they're doing very well financially. That surprised me. They're struggling? They'd never admit it. But I know your mother. She's stressed. Ethan isn't contributing to groceries, utilities, or rent. And your father's retirement income only stretches so far. I let that sink in. So they're paying for him now. Exactly. And they're still not asking him to get a full-time job? No. What are they saying? The same thing they've always said. He just needs a little time. I couldn't help shaking my head. Time? Ethan had been getting a little more time for almost his entire adult life. Every mistake had been cushioned. Every setback softened. Every consequence delayed. That's their decision, I finally said. I know. Carol hesitated. I just wanted to warn you. About what? I think your mom is going to ask you for money soon. I already knew where this was heading. She won't mention Ethan, Carol continued. She'll probably say they're struggling with groceries, or the electric bill, or something else that sounds reasonable. But in reality, I'd be paying for Ethan again. Exactly. I didn't even have to think about my answer. I'm not sending them money. I'm glad. She sounded relieved. Don't undo all the progress you've made. After we hung up, I sat quietly thinking about everything she'd said. Then another realization hit me. I'd spent almost a decade rescuing Ethan. It hadn't started with huge amounts of money. It started with little favors. $20 here. $40 there. Gas money. Groceries. Helping with rent. Covering a phone bill. At the time, each request seemed harmless. Then the amounts slowly grew. Hundreds became thousands. Every year there was another crisis. Another emergency. Another promise that he'd pay me back. Another assurance that things would be different this time. They never were. And if I was being completely honest, this wasn't entirely my family's fault. I played my part too. Every time I'd quietly transferred money instead of saying no. I taught Ethan something. Not responsibility. Not budgeting. I taught him someone would always rescue him. I'd helped build the exact situation I was now trying to escape. That realization wasn't comfortable. But it was true. Unfortunately. Recognizing my own mistakes also made me more determined not to repeat them. By the third week, Thanksgiving was approaching. I thought maybe everyone had finally accepted my decision. Then an email appeared from an address I'd never seen before. Mom had apparently created an entirely new account just to contact me. The subject line simply read, Thanksgiving. The email itself was surprisingly calm. She wrote that she knew I was upset. She said families sometimes disagreed. She reminded me that Thanksgiving was about putting differences aside and being together. Then she listed everyone who would be attending dinner. Dad, Ethan, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. Finally she ended with, we hope you'll come. Love, Mom. I read the email twice. Something bothered me immediately. There wasn't a single apology. Not one sentence acknowledging the ultimatum she'd given me. Nothing about demanding I pay Ethan's bills. Nothing about threatening to cut me out of the family. Instead she wrote, I know you feel like we hurt you. Feel. As though it were simply my interpretation. As though the problem wasn't what happened, but how I'd chosen to react to it. Then came the familiar emotional pressure. Families belong together on Thanksgiving. I understood the real message underneath those words. If I stayed home, it would somehow become my fault that the holiday felt incomplete. I closed the email without replying. Instead I called Aunt Carol. Are you going? I asked. She laughed softly. I am. You are. I want to see your father. There was genuine sadness in her voice. I think he's trapped in the middle of all this. But don't worry. I'm not pretending everything is okay. I already told your mother I think she's handled this terribly. What did she say? Carol sighed. She cried. Then she added, she accused me of turning the family against her. I shook my head. What did you tell her? I told her something she didn't want to hear. I waited. I told her she keeps saying she's protecting one son, while slowly pushing the other one out of the family. Those words hit me harder than I expected. For weeks I'd wondered whether I was imagining things. Whether maybe I really was overreacting. Hearing someone else recognize exactly what was happening made all those doubts disappear. Before we hung up, Carol quietly said, "Whatever happens on Thanksgiving, don't let anyone convince you that having boundaries makes you a bad son." I swallowed hard. Thank you. I don't hear that nearly enough. And for the first time since this entire mess had started, I genuinely believed I wasn't the only person who could see what was really happening. Before hanging up, Aunt Carol gave me one last piece of advice. Forget about what everyone else expects. She laughed softly. Go enjoy your Thanksgiving your own way. I think you've earned that. So that's exactly what I did. Instead of sitting through another meal full of tension and passive-aggressive comments, I stayed home. I ordered Chinese takeout, turned on the football games, spent the afternoon stretched out on my couch with absolutely nobody asking me for money or demanding explanations. Oddly enough, it ended up being the most relaxing Thanksgiving I'd had since I could remember. Around 6 that evening my phone buzzed. It was Carol. Dinner was uncomfortable. A minute later another message came through. Ethan complained almost the entire meal. Your mom kept trying to defend him. Your dad barely spoke. Then she added one more detail. Your uncle asked where you were. I told him you were spending the holiday the way you wanted. Your mom wasn't thrilled with that answer. I couldn't help smiling. I simply replied, "Thanks for letting me know." She answered almost immediately. "Anytime." Then another text. I rescued some pumpkin pie before everyone left. I'll bring you a slice tomorrow. The next afternoon she stopped by with half a pie instead of a single slice. Nobody there deserved the leftovers, she joked. We sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee while eating pie that honestly tasted better than any Thanksgiving dessert I'd had in years. After a while she said, "Your mom asked me to convince you to come for Christmas." I laughed. And? I told her I wasn't volunteering for that job. She smiled. I said if she wants you there, she needs to apologize sincerely instead of pretending nothing happened. What was her response? Carol rolled her eyes. She genuinely claims she has nothing to apologize for. I stared at her. Seriously? According to her, she's been supportive this entire time. I almost laughed again. Supportive? That's the word she used. I leaned back in my chair. So now we're rewriting history. Pretty much. Did anyone remind her about the text? The one saying you'd be excluded from the holidays if you didn't pay Ethan's bills? I did. And? Carol sighed. She said you misunderstood her. That she was emotional. That she never meant it the way you took it. The classic response. I didn't mean it. You misunderstood. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Anything except taking responsibility. I changed the subject. How's Ethan? Carol's expression became noticeably more serious. Honestly? He isn't doing well. In what way? He barely leaves the house. He spends most of his time in his old bedroom. And from what I hear, he blames you for everything. I nodded slowly. I figured. In his mind, if you'd paid the insurance, he'd still have the SUV. If you'd answered his calls, things would have worked out. If you'd just helped one more time, he'd still have his old life. None of that surprised me anymore. Has he found another job? She shook her head. He says he's looking. But your mother believes every excuse he gives. What about Dad? I think he knows Ethan needs a reality check. She hesitated. He just doesn't have the strength to argue with your mom. That sounded exactly like my father. Never loud. Never confrontational. Always trying to keep everyone calm. Even if keeping the peace meant staying silent when someone was being treated unfairly. I looked down at my coffee. Has Dad asked about me? Carol smiled. He has. He asked whether I'd talk to you. He wanted to know if you were okay. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. She looked directly at me. I said you seemed happier than I've seen you in years. I thought about that for a moment. No constant stress. No emergency phone calls. No financial pressure. No guilt. I think you were right. She smiled. I thought so. A few days later, something happened that I honestly wasn't expecting. An unfamiliar number texted me. Mike, it's Dad. I'm borrowing a friend's phone. Would you be willing to talk? I stared at the screen for several minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it. After all, Dad had been there that night. He'd heard Mom threaten to cut me out of the family. He'd watched everything unfold. And he hadn't said a word. Silence can hurt just as much as the words themselves. Still, something about the message felt different. Instead of replying, I called. He answered almost immediately. "Thank you for calling," he said quietly. I didn't waste time. "What did you want to say?" There was a long pause. Then he spoke. "I owe you an apology." I stayed silent. "I should have spoken up that night. I should have told your mother she was wrong. I should have told Ethan that expecting you to pay his bills wasn't fair. But I didn't." "No," I answered. "You didn't. I know." His voice sounded older than I remembered. "I chose the easy path. I thought staying quiet would keep the family together." He took a shaky breath. "Instead, I helped push you away." Those words hit differently. For weeks I'd heard excuses. Manipulation. Half apologies. This wasn't any of those. This sounded genuine. "Dad, I've watched this happen for years. I know your mother has always treated Ethan differently. He's the youngest. She worries about him constantly. But somewhere along the way, we stopped helping him. We started protecting him from every consequence." He paused again. "And I let it happen." "You did." "I know." There wasn't any defensiveness. No attempt to shift blame. Just honesty. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "Ethan isn't doing well. He barely leaves his room. Your mother keeps trying to solve everything for him. But nothing changes." I closed my eyes. For the first time since all of this began, someone else in my family had finally admitted out loud what I'd been seeing for years. The problem had never been the SUV. The real problem was that Ethan had never been allowed to face the consequences of his own choices. "I know," Dad said quietly before I could respond. "I'm not asking you to rescue him." His words surprised me. "Then why are you telling me all this?" There was a long silence. Finally he answered. "Because I want you to know I finally understand." Another pause. "I see what we've done. I see what I've allowed to happen. And I hate that it took losing you for me to admit it." I didn't say anything. For years I'd wanted someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had been happening. Now it was finally happening. Just much later than I ever imagined. "Does Mom know you're talking to me?" I asked. A tired laugh escaped him. "No. If she found out, she'd be furious. So why risk it?" His answer came almost immediately. "Because I miss my son." Then his voice grew quieter. "And I'm tired of pretending your mother's feelings matter more than yours." That sentence stayed with me long after he said it. I closed my eyes. "I'm not ready to come back," I admitted. "I don't even know if I ever will." "I understand." There wasn't any pressure. No guilt. No lecture. Just acceptance. "Could we keep talking?" he asked. "Even if it's just once in a while?" "I'd like that." So would I. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room thinking about everything we'd said. One genuine apology couldn't erase years of resentment. It couldn't undo all the money I'd spent, or the holidays I'd been threatened with losing. But it did something important. It reminded me that people can change, even if that change comes painfully late. December arrived before I realized how much time had passed. Neighborhoods filled with Christmas lights. Stores started playing the same songs on repeat. Families everywhere seemed busy preparing for the holidays. I decorated my own house. Nothing extravagant. A modest Christmas tree. Simple white lights. A wreath on the front door. For the first time, I wasn't decorating because someone expected me to. I was doing it because I wanted my own home to feel comfortable. Dad called a couple more times during the next few weeks. Our conversation stayed simple. Work, sports, the weather, books we'd both been reading. He never once asked when I was coming back. Oddly enough, that made me more willing to answer his calls. Then, on December 10th, another email arrived. Another unfamiliar address. Another message from Mom. The subject line read, "Christmas Eve." I sighed before opening it. She wrote that Christmas Eve had always been our family tradition. That she'd spent decades hosting dinner. That she hoped I'd put my anger aside for one evening. She reminded me that Ethan would be there. Then she wrote something that immediately caught my attention. "He's having an incredibly difficult time. Seeing you would mean so much to him." She ended the email by saying families forgive. Families move forward. Families don't stay angry forever. I read the entire thing twice. Then a third time. The same pattern appeared again. She never admitted what she'd actually done. Instead she described it as, "Whatever hurt you're holding on to." Or, "If you believe we wronged you." Every sentence subtly suggested the issue existed mainly because of my feelings, not because of her actions. The word "feel" kept appearing, as though everything was just my perception, not reality. Then there was the part about Ethan. Apparently Christmas should revolve around what would make him feel better. Not about repairing the relationship she damaged with me. I quietly deleted the email. About an hour later, Aunt Carol texted. "I'm guessing you got the Christmas invitation." I did. Her reply came instantly. "Don't let tradition become another form of pressure. If you're not ready, stay home." I smiled. "That's exactly what I'm doing." "Good." She added one more message. "I'll save you dessert again." The closer Christmas got, the more emails Mom sent. Each one sounded a little more emotional than the last. "Christmas won't feel the same. Your father misses you. Ethan keeps asking about you." That last line almost made me laugh. Really? The same brother who'd blamed me for losing his SUV? Who'd accused me of ruining his life? Who'd spent weeks telling everyone I was selfish? Now supposedly missed me. Maybe he did. Or maybe he simply missed having someone else solve his problems. A few days before Christmas, Dad called again. This time his voice sounded heavier than usual. "Your mom's having a hard time." I waited. "Things are difficult." "In what way?" "Money." He sighed. "And Ethan." Apparently nothing had changed. Ethan still wasn't working. He still wasn't contributing to bills. He spent most of his time in his room while Mom continued insisting he simply needed more time. "She thinks he's depressed," Dad said. "Maybe he is. But he's stopped trying." There was a long silence. I finally asked the obvious question. "Are you asking me for money?" He answered so quickly it almost startled me. "No. Absolutely not. I'd never ask you to do that again." I relaxed a little. "So why are you telling me?" "Because I don't want you blaming yourself if things get worse." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I know how you think. You'll hear something happened. You'll wonder if you should have stepped in. I don't want you carrying that weight anymore." I sat quietly. He wasn't asking for help. He was giving me permission not to help. It was such a small thing. Yet it meant more than he probably realized. "Thank you," I said softly. "I'm trying," he answered. "I know." After we ended the call, I kept thinking about the difference between him and Mom. Dad wasn't perfect. Far from it. But at least now he was respecting the boundaries I'd set instead of trying to break them. That alone felt like progress. Then, just 2 days before Christmas, another unknown number texted me. At first I assumed it was another relative. Instead it read, "Mike, it's Ethan. I'm using Mom's new phone because you blocked everything else. Please. I just need 5 minutes. I'm sorry for everything. About the SUV. About asking you for money. About how I handled all of this. Can we please talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. The apology sounded better than anything he'd said before. But something still felt incomplete. He said he was sorry. Yet he never explained what he believed he'd actually done wrong. And after everything that had happened, that difference mattered more than ever. I kept reading Ethan's message. The more I looked at it, the more I realized something was missing. He apologized for asking me for money. But he never apologized for believing he was entitled to it. He never acknowledged years of expecting me to rescue him. Never admitted that he'd treated my savings like an extension of his own bank account. Never apologized for acting as though my financial stability somehow obligated me to support his lifestyle. The apology focused on the outcome, not the attitude that created it. I locked my phone without replying. About an hour later another message appeared. "Please, Mike. I'm really struggling. I lost the SUV. I can't find a job. I'm 28 years old and living back with Mom and Dad. I feel like I've completely failed." Then one final sentence. "Can we just talk, brother to brother?" I stared at those words. Brother to brother. It sounded nice. But I honestly couldn't remember many times our relationship had actually felt that way. Growing up, I'd always been the dependable one. The one expected to share. To help. To understand. To sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, our relationship had quietly shifted from brothers to provider and recipient. I started typing several different replies. Deleted each one. Eventually I settled on something simple. "I'm not ready to talk yet." I hit send. Almost immediately the typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally his reply arrived. "When will you be ready?" I answered honestly. "I don't know." After that, the conversation ended. Christmas Eve came and went. I stayed home again. Cooked myself a nice dinner. Opened a good bottle of wine. Watched a couple of old Christmas movies I'd loved since childhood. The evening was quiet. Peaceful. Most surprisingly, Nobody tried to drag me back into the family gathering at the last minute. Around 8 o'clock Aunt Carol called. "How's your evening?" "Relaxing." She laughed. "Wish I could say the same." "What happened?" "The usual." Ethan disappeared into his room halfway through dinner. "Your mom kept pretending everything was fine. Your dad spent most of the night unusually quiet." She hesitated. "Your uncle kept asking where you were." "What did you tell him?" "I said you were exactly where you wanted to be." I smiled. "Thank you." "Your mother asked me to call you. She wanted one last attempt to get you to come over." "And?" I told her no. I appreciated her more every time we talked. After a brief silence she said, "I'm worried about your parents." "Why?" "They're under a lot of financial pressure. Ethan still isn't contributing. Your mom keeps covering for him. And your father looks exhausted." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "That's still not something I can fix." "I know. I'm not asking you to. I'm just telling you what's happening." Before ending the call she asked one more question. "You've been talking to your dad, haven't you?" "Yeah. A little. Nothing heavy. But we've stayed in touch." "I'm glad." She sounded genuinely relieved. "I think he needs that. He needs to know he hasn't lost both of his sons." After hanging up I sat quietly for a while. Her comments stayed with me. One son had built a stable life. The other had spent years avoiding responsibility. The contrast couldn't have been much clearer anymore. I'd used my inheritance to buy a home. Ethan had spent his chasing immediate gratification. I'd spent years preparing for the future. He'd assumed someone else would always handle tomorrow. Now both of us were living with the consequences of those choices. Mine happened to include peace. His included moving back into his childhood bedroom. The week between Christmas and New Year's felt strangely calm. Almost like life had finally slowed down enough for me to breathe. I worked shorter days. Went on long walks. Finished books that had been sitting untouched on my shelf for months. There wasn't another emergency waiting around the corner. And every day that passed made me realize how exhausting my old life had actually been. Then, a few days before New Year's, another unfamiliar number called. Normally I would have ignored it. For some reason I answered. "Hello." A hesitant voice replied. "Mike. This is Olivia." Took me a second to remember. Olivia. Ethan's girlfriend. We hadn't spoken since she'd sent me a message weeks earlier asking me to talk to him. "Hi," I said cautiously. "I'm sorry to bother you." "It's okay. What happened?" There was a long silence. Then she said, "I'm leaving him." I sat down immediately. I wasn't expecting that. "I can't keep doing this." Her voice sounded exhausted. "I've tried everything." I encouraged him to apply for jobs. I offered to help with resumes. I suggested counseling. I even offered to drive him to interviews. And? He doesn't actually want to change. He wants someone else to fix things. Those words sounded painfully familiar. "I know exactly what you mean." "I figured you would." She took a deep breath. "I've spent months believing things would improve. But all he does now is sit in his room. He plays video games. Complains about how unfair life is. And waits for somebody else to rescue him." I didn't interrupt. She needed someone to listen. Eventually she asked, "Can I tell you why I really called?" "Of course." "I'm worried about what happens after I leave." "What do you mean?" "He's already blaming you for almost everything." I closed my eyes. I had a feeling. "He keeps saying that if you'd paid the insurance, he'd still have the SUV. He'd still have transportation. He'd still have a job. And I wouldn't be leaving." I almost sighed. The chain of logic was painfully predictable. One decision leading to another until somehow every problem became my fault. "That's not why you're leaving." "No." Her answer came instantly. "I'm leaving because Ethan refuses to grow up." The SUV didn't end our relationship. His refusal to take responsibility did. That distinction mattered. A lot. "Does he know?" I asked. "I'm telling him tomorrow." She paused. "And honestly, I'm expecting him to blame you for that too." Unfortunately. After everything I'd seen over the past 2 months, I couldn't say I doubted it. Before hanging up, Olivia said one last thing. "I wanted to warn you. So you're not caught off guard if he starts trying to contact you again." "I appreciate that." Her voice softened. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." "What do you mean?" "You stopped rescuing him. It probably feels cruel. But honestly, I think it's the first real consequence he's faced in years." After we ended the call, I decided not to wait for the storm. I tightened every privacy setting on my social media accounts, blocked several more phone numbers that looked suspicious, even texted Aunt Carol to let her know Ethan might start asking relatives for new ways to reach me. Unfortunately, I was right. About 2 days later, the messages started. New numbers, new email addresses, new accounts, same accusations. Olivia left me. This is your fault. If you'd paid the insurance, none of this would have happened. You destroyed my life. You destroyed our family. I hope you're satisfied. I read every message with surprising emotional distance. Months earlier they probably would have crushed me. Now, they mostly confirmed that nothing had changed. Ethan still believed every consequence in his life had been created by someone else. Not once did he write, I should have made different choices. Instead, every message searched for another person to blame. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Dad. He picked up almost immediately. I heard Olivia left. I know, he replied quietly. Ethan's taking it hard. I'm sure he is. There was a brief silence before I asked, is he blaming me? Dad sighed. Yes. I figured. He keeps saying that if you'd helped him keep the SUV, Olivia never would have left. That's not why she left. I know. His answer came without hesitation. She talked to us before moving out. She explained exactly why. What did she say? She told us she'd spent months trying to encourage him. Job applications, interviews, counseling. Nothing worked. She said Ethan wasn't interested in rebuilding his life. He was waiting for somebody else to rebuild it for him. I nodded to myself. How did Mom react? Dad gave another tired sigh. She insisted Olivia didn't understand what Ethan was going through. She kept saying people were expecting too much from him. And you? Another pause. I think Olivia was right. Those words caught my attention. I also think we're responsible. I stayed quiet. We never allowed Ethan to experience failure. We always stepped in, always fixed it, always softened the consequences. And now, he doesn't know how to solve problems without someone rescuing him. That was probably the most honest thing I'd ever heard my father say. It's still not too late, I told him. What do you mean? Let him experience reality. Stop protecting him. I wish it were that simple. What happened? Your mom is talking about co-signing another loan. I sat upright. For another vehicle? Yes. He doesn't even have a job. I know. She says he needs transportation to find one. The same circular logic. He needed a car to work. He needed work to afford a car. So she'd create another financial obligation and hope everything somehow fixed itself. Dad, don't put your name on that loan. Silence. Please. If she wants to make that decision herself, that's her choice. But don't let yourself get dragged into it. It'll cause a huge argument. I know. But losing your retirement because of Ethan won't help anyone. He didn't answer immediately. Finally he whispered, I'll think about it. After we hung up, I wasn't sure whether anything would actually change. Dad had spent his whole life avoiding conflict. Standing up to Mom would probably be one of the hardest things he'd ever done. Still, at least someone had finally spoken the truth aloud. Whether he acted on it was now his decision. New Year's Eve arrived. Just like Thanksgiving. Just like Christmas. I spent it quietly at home. Good food. Good music. No drama. When midnight arrived, Aunt Carol sent me a text. Happy New Year. I'm proud of you for protecting your peace this year. Here's to a better one ahead. I smiled and replied, Happy New Year. Thanks for standing by me. Several weeks passed after that. Life finally started feeling normal. The constant family crisis had disappeared from my daily routine. Work became my biggest source of stress again. Honestly, it was a welcome change. Then, one Saturday morning in late January, Aunt Carol came over for coffee. As usual, she had news. Your mom still asks about you. I looked up. What does she ask? The usual. Whether you're happy. If you've mentioned coming back. If you ever talk about her. And what do you tell her? The truth. She smiled. I tell her you seem happier than I've seen you in years. I laughed quietly. I'm guessing she doesn't enjoy hearing that. Not even a little. Why? Because she expected you to come back. When you didn't? It challenged everything she believed. What do you mean? She always believed family meant unconditional access. No matter what happened. No matter how someone treated you, you were supposed to forgive. You were supposed to return. You were supposed to keep sacrificing. Carol stirred her coffee thoughtfully. She still doesn't understand that boundaries aren't abandonment. I thought about that for a while. It explained almost everything. Then I asked, has anything changed at home? A little. How little? She smiled. Ethan finally found a job. That surprised me. Really? It isn't glamorous. But it's steady. And he's contributing a small amount toward rent. So, progress. A little. She shrugged. He's still bitter. Still convinced life has treated him unfairly. Still blaming other people more than himself. But at least he's working. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't the ending Mom had hoped for. But for the first time in a very long time, Ethan was taking at least a small step toward supporting himself instead of expecting someone else to do it for him. By early summer, nearly 6 months had passed. Life had settled into a rhythm I never realized I was missing. Then one evening another email from Mom appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The first sentence immediately caught my attention. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. That alone was different. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't reminding me about family traditions. She wasn't trying to guilt me into coming home. She continued. I know you're still hurt. There are things I need to say. I kept reading. She admitted she still believed families should support one another. She admitted she still wished I'd shown Ethan more patience. But then came something I'd honestly stopped expecting. I was wrong to give you that ultimatum. I was wrong to threaten to keep you away from the holidays. I was wrong to expect you to solve Ethan's problems. I read those lines twice. Then she wrote something else. Your father has told me about your promotion at work. I'm proud of you. I should have said that much sooner. My throat tightened. She continued. I spent so many years focusing on Ethan's struggles that I forgot to celebrate your successes. I'm sorry for that too. It wasn't a perfect apology. She still defended parts of her thinking. She still believed I could have handled some things differently. But for the first time, she wasn't pretending nothing had happened. She wasn't rewriting history. She was accepting responsibility for at least part of it. I closed my laptop and walked away. For 2 days I thought about that email. Eventually I realized something. Forgiveness didn't have to mean pretending everything was okay. It could simply mean being willing to have one honest conversation. So I replied. Thank you for apologizing. I'm not ready for family dinners. I'm not ready to see Ethan. But if you'd like, I'd be willing to meet for coffee. Just the two of us. Her response arrived less than an hour later. Yes. Whenever you're comfortable. 3 weeks later we met at a small coffee shop halfway between our homes. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked older. More tired. The previous months had clearly taken their toll. We ordered coffee. Then sat in awkward silence for nearly a minute. Finally she spoke. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either. She gave a small smile. You look happy. I am. Another silence followed. Then she said, your father told me about your promotion. Congratulations. Thank you. She slowly stirred her coffee without taking a sip. I've had a lot of time to think. I waited. I handled everything badly. The ultimatum. The pressure. The way I always expected you to solve Ethan's problems. I nodded. What changed? She looked down at the table. Money. That answer surprised me. She continued before I could respond. We couldn't keep doing it anymore. Your father finally refused. He said we were sacrificing our own future trying to protect Ethan from his. I smiled slightly. So he finally stood up. He did. She gave a tired laugh. It caused one of the biggest arguments we've ever had. I can imagine. What happened with Ethan? He blamed everyone. He yelled. He accused us of abandoning him. But eventually, he accepted a warehouse job. He contributes a little toward household expenses now. It isn't much. But it's something. I'm glad. She looked exhausted. He's miserable. He hates the work. He hates living at home. He hates watching his friends move forward while he feels stuck. I nodded slowly. Those are consequences. She looked at me. I know. There wasn't any defensiveness this time. Just acceptance. I kept trying to protect him from failure. I answered quietly. But you also protected him from learning. She closed her eyes. I know. There were tears forming before she continued. I don't know how to help him anymore. I don't know where support ends and enabling begins. I thought about that for a moment. Sometimes helping means letting someone struggle. She looked uncertain. What if he fails? Then he fails. And then he learns. You can't build someone else's life for them. She wiped her eyes. I don't know how to stop being his safety net. I smiled gently. You don't have to figure it out alone. She looked up. What do you mean? Have you ever considered talking to someone? You mean therapy? I nodded. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss the idea. Instead, she gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. Your father suggested the same thing. And I'm actually thinking about it. That was probably the most unexpected sentence I'd heard all year. Growing up, Mom had always treated therapy like admitting failure. Now, she was willing to consider it. I'm glad, I told her honestly. I think it could help. We stayed there for almost another hour. We didn't erase years of hurt. We didn't solve every problem. We didn't magically become the perfect family. But for the first time in a long time, we had an honest conversation instead of another argument. When we finally stood up to leave, Mom hugged me. This time, I hugged her back. She held the hug for a moment before stepping back. Would you be willing to do this again sometime? She asked. Maybe. She smiled. I'll happily accept maybe. As I drove home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Mom hadn't magically become a different person. Neither had I. There was still hurt. Still distance. Still years of habits neither of us could erase overnight. But there was movement. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were walking in the right direction instead of farther apart. A few weeks later, Dad called with another update. Ethan's moving out. That surprised me. Really? He found a roommate. The apartment isn't anything special. But it's affordable. So he's finally living on his own again. How do you feel about it? I asked. Dad didn't hesitate. Relieved. He chuckled quietly. Your mom is nervous. She still wants to protect him. But I think this is exactly what he needs. So do I. Dad paused. He asked about you. What did you tell him? I told him you're doing well. That you're happy. And? He didn't love hearing that. I laughed. I figured. He's still angry. He still blames you for a lot of what happened. I don't know whether that'll ever change. I looked out the window at my backyard. You know what? What? I'm okay with that. You really mean it? I thought carefully before answering. I can't control the story Ethan tells himself. I can't force him to accept responsibility. I can't make him see me differently. The only thing I can control is whether I let his version of events steal my peace. And I don't. Dad was quiet for a second. I'm proud of you. Thanks. About a month later, another unexpected message appeared. This time it was a request through social media. The sender was Ethan. I debated opening it. Eventually I did. Mike. I'm moving into an apartment next week. Well, technically I'm splitting it with a roommate. But it's a start. I kept reading. I know we're still not really talking. And honestly, I'm still upset about a lot of things. But I also understand some things now that I didn't before. That caught my attention. Working full-time. Paying rent. Buying groceries. Paying insurance. Turns out life is expensive. Then came the sentence that stayed with me. It isn't fun. But at least it's finally my responsibility. I read that paragraph several times. It wasn't a perfect apology. He still carried resentment. He still wasn't accepting every part of what had happened. But for the first time, he was acknowledging that adulthood came with responsibilities he'd spent years avoiding. Most importantly, he wasn't asking me for anything. No money. No favors. No rescue. Just an update. I started typing several responses. Deleted them. Started over. Eventually I sent something simple. Congratulations on the apartment. I hope things keep moving in the right direction. I'm glad you're trying. His reply came almost instantly. Thanks. Just one word. Oddly enough, it felt like enough. When September arrived, I realized almost a full year had passed since the night I'd blocked my family. I sat on my back porch one Saturday morning with a mug of coffee thinking about everything that had changed. Ethan had lost a relationship. Lost a vehicle. Lost the illusion that someone would always rescue him. But he'd also gained something. A steady job. His own place. The first real signs of independence. Mom had lost something too. She'd lost the belief that protecting someone meant shielding them from every consequence. From what Dad told me, she'd actually started seeing a therapist. Slowly. Reluctantly. But consistently. Dad had changed as well. He stopped choosing silence every time conflict appeared. He wasn't perfect, but he'd finally found his own voice. As for me, I'd lost the version of family I'd spent years trying to preserve. The Sunday dinners. The constant role of fixer. The belief that love had to be earned through sacrifice. In exchange, I'd gain peace, self-respect, healthy boundaries, the understanding that caring about someone doesn't require carrying their life on your shoulders. Just then my phone buzzed. "And Carol, coffee this week? I have stories about your mom's therapy adventures." I laughed out loud. "Absolutely." I slipped my phone back into my pocket and looked across my backyard. Life wasn't perfect. Our family wasn't magically healed. Ethan still had a long way to go. Mom still struggled with old habits. Dad was still learning to speak up. But something fundamental had changed. The chaos no longer lived inside my head. It belonged to the people creating it. And I'd finally learned I didn't have to carry it with them. A year earlier I believed saying no meant abandoning my family. Now I understood something completely different. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for yourself, and even for the people you love, is stop protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. Just as I finished my coffee, another text came in. "Dad, dinner next week? Just the two of us. My treat." I smiled before replying. I'd like that. Not because everything had been repaired. Not because the past had disappeared. But because we were building something new. Something honest. Something healthier than what we'd had before. One relationship at a time. And for the first time in years. That felt like enough. AITA for refusing to pay my brother's bills, cutting off my family after they tried to force me to bail him out again, and letting him face the consequences of his own choices?